day after Christmas, 13 years back, was the morning of my first snowfall. As I threw on my jacket and boots, I couldn't wait to go outside. Blanketed in white was a world I had never seen before. I walked in the crunching snow, attempted to build a snowman, and failed. Made a snow angel instead, and felt very proud. It must have been around 40-45 minutes outdoors when my bones started to chill and I headed inside. As I reached my apartment, I heard some police sirens on the street. I looked out to see a bunch of officers carefully examining the cars parked in the lot. I didn't pay much attention and went on to remove my jacket and boots when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a police officer staring into my face with his gun out. I froze. He asked me if I was down there removing the snow from the parked cars. I nodded. Did you attempt to vandalize or break into the cars? What? Gosh, no! Turns out you're not supposed to touch other people's property in this country, which I, the newly minted 25-year-old immigrant, was blissfully unaware of. I was happily removing snow from the sides of the parked cars after a snow shower, which was such a noble thing to do, right? Except it wasn't to someone watching me from the balcony. 911. Anyways, the cops asked me a few more questions, looked around my apartment, and left me with a warning that sounded like a bunch of instructions to a kindergartner. Do not touch other people's things. Keep your hands to yourself. Try to stay out of trouble. I had learnt my lesson. In order to survive in an alien land, I must learn its laws. And to thrive, I must blend in. Blend in, right? I'm a pro at that. Right from an early age, I have made desperate efforts to look like them, to sound like them, and to have an opinion just like them. And by them, I mean the cool beans. So where this great idea of blending in came about was actually at my school's field trip, where a group of cool girls were bullying me by throwing pebbles at me. I tolerated it for a while, but once it grew a little out of hand, I went to the chaperone to ask for help. But I was told to deal with it myself. So I did. I threw a bunch of their pebbles right back at them. And this time, it was the OG bullies who walked with the complaint to the chaperone, and I thought to myself that just like me, they would also be told to go figure. But instead, I saw the chaperone walk right towards me, infuriated, along with the class teacher. And these group of girls followed at their heels with sly smiles. Uh-oh, I was in trouble. In a pretty serious one, actually. I was called out in front of the whole class and was quite generously screamed at and humiliated. My upbringing was questioned, and so was my character. As if that wasn't enough, there was a written note sent home that said, I need help to control my violent temper, and should such an incident occur again, there would be serious consequences which might lead to my termination from the school. Aside from being deeply saddened and embarrassed, I was aghast. How was it that my plea for help fell on deaf ears, whereas theirs was heard loud and clear? I needed an explanation, I deserved one. But none came my way. Needless to say, this incident left a scar on my young mind. The only logical explanation my immature brain coughed out was that I needed to belong in the group of the popular girls. I decided to become one of them. Not necessarily evil, but most definitely popular. And there started my desperate journey to belong. I molded myself into a shape that wasn't entirely mine. From school to college to workplace, I laughed at their unfunny jokes and nodded in agreement, even though I didn't quite agree. In order to be acceptable, I changed my personality inside out. I straightened my curly hair, wore clothes that were approved by them, and sometimes even used the fancy forbidden words just to belong. I was their yes man. I blended. In fact, I blended so hard, I was rendered almost invisible. Fast forward to the day of my first snowfall. Here I was, in the United States of America, 13 years forward and thousands of miles away from that story, and yet again I was sort of reprimanded for doing no wrong. My initial instinct was to resort to the tried and tested method of aping the known, the popular. The voice in my head said, "Oh, Deepti, you've done this before successfully and you can do it again." But thankfully, the series of events unfolded slightly differently this time. I was always good at art. So a few days after the surprise visit by the uniformed guests at my apartment, I walked to the nearby Michael's and bought myself paints, brushes, and canvases. I started creating artworks that I had grown up practicing as a cultural tradition. These paintings were overtly detailed, extremely vibrant, and narrated Indian social and mythological stories. They were nothing like the artwork that you find around here in the US. Since I was pretty good at it, within a couple of weeks, I had a handful of paintings that I hung up on the walls of my apartment. Then came home a flyer inviting local artists to participate in an art showcase at July 4th parade. This could have been my chance to shine. But that voice in my head reappeared and said, "You don't want to stick out as a sore thumb, don't do it. Do not participate." Like all the other times, I was so inclined to listen to that voice. But thankfully, better sense prevailed. I shushed that voice and took the leap of faith. I went ahead and did participate. It was hard. That brave step sounded brave, but it stripped me of the years of personality that I had hidden under superficiality. But that brave step that day eventually went on to define me. That day I realized that we have the power to change the world's perspective towards us. I was not judged that day. In fact, I was celebrated. Because I was not just different, I was special. My traditional practice became my superpower that helped me stand out. I chose my art as an instrument to combat invisibility and to become the popular. Even American Psychological Association states that practicing one's own culture helps with higher self-esteem and reduce prejudice. Brunswick Crossings mentions that practicing tradition builds character and gives children a sense of identity. In this fast-paced and busy life, we all tend to give up on some or the other traditional practices that our families and loved ones practice. And that's why we all look, sound, and behave the same these days. Perhaps this is our moment to look back and find what was that which defined the uniqueness of our identity and bring it back into practice. The good news is that it's not as much work as it is made to sound. In these 13 years since my great epiphany, as I continue to practice and teach traditional arts, I realize we are all programmed to quickly relearn to love our tradition and culture at a slight nudge. Even the youth feels immensely empowered to embrace their cultural identity in public if encouraged the right way. And our families and households are the perfect training ground for them, like mine was for me. So this is real. It has helped me and many others step out from the shadows and find our self-worth. So tonight, as we go home, I have a task for all of us. Let's take a paper and pencil. Not your cell phones, not your tablets. Let's do it the old-fashioned way, okay? Let's take a paper and pencil and list down the traditions that our family practice and we no longer do. It could be at any interval, daily, weekly, yearly, anything. Now from the list, let's pick our most favorite that we would like to reincorporate into our lives and add it to the calendar. We must know that practicing something different doesn't make us weird. It is a statement of authenticity. That instead of looking around, we sometimes have to look behind to rediscover our true self. That instead of blending into the background, we have the power to choose to stand out and be the foreground. Thank you.